In 753 BC, on the muddy banks of the Tiber River, a city was born, not from silence but from legend. Its founder, Romulus, was said to be no ordinary man. The Romans believed he was the son of Mars, the god of war, that fearsome deity every soldier prayed to before drawing his sword. The story goes that Romulus and his twin brother Remus, abandoned as infants, were suckled by a she-wolf along the river's edge. A god's blood ran in his veins. A wolf had nursed him. And so Rome began, not merely as a settlement, but as a declaration. This city would be unlike anything the world had ever seen. But behind every beautiful myth lies a rougher truth. Before Romulus, before any name was carved into those seven-storied hills, people already lived there. The Latins, the Sabines, the Etruscans, each a piece of a mosaic that history still struggles to fully reconstruct. Rome did not spring from the chest of a lone hero. It emerged from the slow, messy convergence of tribes, rivalries, intermarriages, and shared riverbanks. Yet myths are more powerful than facts, and Romulus endured. Because a nation that believes itself descended from gods can conquer the world with far greater conviction. What is certain is this: in the 8th century BC, small villages began to stir on these Tiber hills. The Palatine, the Aventine, the Capitoline, each a natural fortress. The river brought water. The soil was generous. Trade routes wound through like arteries. From the very beginning, Rome sat in a golden geographical position, and every man and woman who lived there could feel it, as if the earth itself was whispering, "Here, build your empire here." Rome began as a kingdom. 7 kings ruled in succession over this fledgling city, each shaping it in ways the world would not forget. From Romulus himself, the city's architect, to Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud, whose arrogance became his undoing and in falling laid the foundation for something far greater. This royal era lasted roughly 250 years. Streets were cut, temples rose, laws were written. Every decade, Rome was less a village and more something else. Something the world had no name for yet. The Etruscans played a towering role in this era. A more advanced civilization to the north, they passed on engineering techniques, artistic traditions, and even religious symbols to their eager Roman neighbors. Some of those 7 kings were Etruscan themselves. Rome in those years was like a brilliant, insatiable child, absorbing philosophy from the Greeks, engineering from the Etruscans, spiritual traditions from the East. This extraordinary capacity to learn, to steal, to adapt and improve. This was one of Rome's greatest secrets, the root of a future no one yet dared imagine. But nothing lasts forever, not even kings. In 509 BC, the Romans rose against Tarquin, a tyrant whose cruelties had finally overflowed, and they drove him from the city. Then they made a vow. Never again would one man hold all the power. That moment was one of the most consequential in all of human history. The Romans did not merely overthrow a king. They invented the Republic, res publica, the public thing. Power no longer belonged to one man. It belonged, at least in principle, to everyone. Yes, in those days, everyone meant largely the aristocracy and the wealthy. But even so, no great civilization before Rome had dared take that step. The Senate, composed of nobles, became the seat of power. 2 consuls were elected each year to govern the state, each holding the other in check. And above all else, law, the 12 tables inscribed around 450 BC, became the bedrock upon which the legal systems of much of the modern world would one day be built. The Republic grew through war, relentless, brutal, and strangely educational. The Latin Wars, the Samnite Wars, the war against Pyrrhus of Epirus. Each time Rome was beaten, and beaten badly, it rose, studied its wounds, and returned fiercer than before. This resilience was something Rome's enemies never understood. They thought a defeat meant an ending. For Rome, a defeat was a lesson, a brutal, blood-soaked lesson, but a lesson nonetheless. Then came the Punic Wars, and with them, Hannibal Barca, one of the most brilliant military minds in the history of human warfare. Hannibal crossed the Alps with his war elephants in a move so audacious it bordered on madness, and he drove Rome to the very edge of extinction. At the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, 80,000 Roman soldiers were slaughtered in a single day. 80,000. The city fell into a terror so thick you could feel it in the air. But Rome did not surrender. It held, and held, and held, until Scipio Africanus stepped forward, took the war to Hannibal's own soil, Africa, and broke him there. Carthage crumbled. Rome emerged as the sole supreme power of the Western Mediterranean, and the world reeled. But wealth and power are a slow poison. As the empire expanded, the gap between the rich and the desperate poor grew into a chasm. The Gracchi brothers tried to redistribute land to the poor. Both were murdered for it. Marius, Sulla, Pompey, Caesar, each man a storm in human form, each one tearing at the fabric of the Republic. The great institution was rotting from within, and in the midst of this chaos, one man rose. A man whose name would bend the arc of history itself. Julius Caesar believed in one thing above all others, that an iron will could change anything. He conquered Gaul, all of what we now call France, in 10 years. Millions enslaved. Legendary wealth gathered. And when the Senate ordered him to disband his army, Caesar did something no Roman commander had ever dared. He crossed the Rubicon River and marched on Rome. That crossing the Rubicon, became a phrase the human race still uses to describe the point of no return. Because it was exactly that. There was no going back. Not for Caesar, not for Rome. Caesar ruled as dictator for only 4 years. But what years they were. He reformed the calendar. That calendar with minor adjustments is the one you use today. He simplified the laws. He gave land to the poor. He built new cities. His popularity among ordinary Romans was extraordinary, almost supernatural. And that was precisely what terrified the aristocracy. On the Ides of March, 44 BC, 23 blades ended him. His assassins believed they had saved the Republic. Instead, they lit a fire that would never go out. Caesar's death ignited a new civil war. In the end, Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir, prevailed. He defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra. He annexed Egypt. And in 27 BC, he was granted the title Augustus, meaning the sacred, the venerable. The Republic was over. The empire had begun. Augustus ruled for 50 years. 50 years that Rome would call the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Roads were built, their foundations so deep the traces still lie beneath the asphalt of modern Europe. Aqueducts hauled water from distant mountains into the heart of the city. Law was uniform across the empire. Roman legions held the frontiers so the interior could breathe and trade and dream. Art and literature soared through their golden age. Virgil wrote the Aeneid. Horace sang his odes. Ovid turned love into poetry. Rome at its height was something the world had never seen and has never quite seen since. After Augustus, emperors came and went, some great, some monstrous. Tiberius, cold and calculating. Caligula, whose madness became legend. Nero, who when Rome burned, was said to have played his lyre in the glow of the flames. Vespasian, whose son Titus reduced Jerusalem to rubble. And Trajan, under whom the empire swelled to its greatest size, stretching from the shores of Britain to the banks of the Euphrates, from the forests of Germany to the deserts of Egypt. At its peak, Rome held the world in its fist. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, was the last great symbol of that golden era. A man who fought savage wars against the Germanic tribes on the northern frontier, and yet, in the nights between battles, wrote the Meditations, a book intended for no one but himself, a private journal, a man talking to himself about virtue, loss, and the passage of time. 2,000 years later, millions still read it and find peace in its pages. Marcus died in 180 AD. His son Commodus took the throne, and Rome, that mountain of civilization, began its long slide downward. In the 3rd century AD, Rome entered what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. In 50 years, 50 emperors rose and fell, most of them murdered. The economy collapsed. Coins lost their value. Great plagues emptied cities. Barbarian tribes hammered the northern borders without mercy. The Sassanid Persians rose in the east with terrifying strength, and Emperor Valerian, the first Roman emperor in history to be taken prisoner by a foreign enemy, was captured and spent the rest of his life in Persian captivity. Rome was being pressed from every direction at once, and for the first time, it seemed as though the pressure might finally be enough. In the midst of this slow-motion collapse, a new faith was spreading through the empire's veins: Christianity. The Romans had tortured and persecuted Christians. Nero blamed them for the Great Fire of Rome. They were thrown to lions in the amphitheaters, executed in public spectacles meant to extinguish their defiance. And yet no cruelty could put out this flame. Christianity took root in the hearts of slaves, of women, of the poor, of everyone whom the old world had left behind. It grew in silence, in catacombs, in whispered prayers, until it was everywhere at once. In 313 AD, Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, proclaiming religious freedom throughout the empire. Legend holds that before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, Constantine saw a cross blazing in the sky and heard a voice say, "In this sign, conquer." Whether vision or strategy, the result was the same. Rome became Christian. And with that transformation, the world changed, forever and completely. But even that transformation could not stop the fall. The empire split, Western Rome and Eastern Rome, with its capital at Constantinople. The West buckled under the relentless blows of the Visigoths, the Vandals, and the Huns. In 410 AD, Alaric, king of the Visigoths, sacked the city of Rome itself. The ancient world shuddered. St. Augustine, writing in North Africa as the news spread, told his readers to seek the city of God, not the cities of men, which were always destined to fall. And in 476 AD, the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire, Romulus Augustulus, bearing ironically the name of Rome's founder, was deposed by Odoacer, a Germanic chieftain. The Western Roman Empire was officially over. But Rome did not die, not entirely. The Eastern Empire, what we call Byzantium, endured for nearly another 1,000 years. Constantinople, the city Constantine built and named after himself, became the center of civilization, while Western Europe sank into the long darkness of the Middle Ages. The Byzantines preserved Greek and Roman literature. They kept science alive. Their churches blazed with gold and mosaic light. And when the Renaissance finally came, it was Byzantine scholars, fleeing westward with their manuscripts, who carried the ancient world's knowledge into a new era. In 1453, Sultan Mehmed II, the Conqueror, brought his artillery to the thousand-year-old walls of Constantinople and broke them open. The last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI, fought like a common soldier and was cut down in the chaos. His body was never found. Eastern Rome was gone, but its legacy reborn in Venice, in Florence, in the Renaissance that was just beginning to transform everything. After the fall of the Western Empire, the city of Rome itself fell into a long and melancholy silence. A population that had reached 1 million at its peak dwindled to a few tens of thousands. Temple columns vanished beneath grass and weeds. The Colosseum, where millions had roared and wept and cheered, was stripped for stone, used as a quarry, repurposed as a fortress. The marble of ancient palaces became the walls of new churches. The eternal city looked for a time like a ghost. But the church, the Catholic Church, planted a seed in those ashes. The popes stayed in Rome and did not leave. By the 8th century, the Papal States gave the church real political power in Italy. When Charlemagne was crowned in Rome in 800 AD, the dream of a Roman Empire, now reborn as the Holy Roman Empire, echoed through the world once more. The name of Rome rang out again, this time wrapped in faith and sacred authority, and the old stones seemed to remember what they once were. The 15th century brought Rome's most spectacular rebirth. The Renaissance, born in Italy, a word meaning rebirth, was felt more intensely in Rome than anywhere else. The Renaissance popes, Julius II, Leo X, transformed the city into the center of the world once more. They summoned the greatest artists alive. Michelangelo painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, a work that still stops every viewer in their tracks, forces their neck back, and leaves them breathless. Raphael filled the Vatican rooms with the School of Athens, that glorious gathering of ancient philosophers reimagined in Renaissance light. Ancient architecture breathed again as inspiration. Bramante, Michelangelo, and Bernini each left their hands on St. Peter's Basilica. The building meant to announce to the world the power and endurance of the Church. The Piazza Navona, the Pantheon, its dome still mathematically perfect after 2,000 years. The Colosseum, drawing pilgrims and travelers from distant lands. Rome was becoming Rome again, not through armies this time, but through beauty, through stone and light and the stubborn insistence that greatness is never truly gone. The 19th century brought Rome's final great transformation. In 1871, Rome became the capital of a newly unified Italy, possible only because the Pope's political power was finally stripped away. A bitter moment for the Church, but a turning point for the Italian nation. The city was rebuilt. Wide boulevards were cut through old neighborhoods. Grand government buildings rose. The population surged. Rome put on the colors of modernity, and you could feel the energy in the streets. In the 20th century, Mussolini tried to drag Rome back to ancient greatness through fascism, through spectacle. He bulldozed neighborhoods to expose ancient ruins. He plastered Roman eagles and columns across his propaganda. But that dream died in the wreckage of World War II. In 1946, Italy became a republic, and Rome, once more, for the 100th time in its long life, reinvented itself as a democratic capital. Rome today is a city where time has been laid down like geological strata, layer upon layer, century upon century. Walk its streets and one moment you are beside a sleek modern cafe, and the next you are standing before columns erected 25 centuries ago. Beneath those streets, archaeologists still uncover new layers of history. Every time the city tries to build a new subway line, workers strike ancient ruins and everything stops. Rome is held hostage by its own past, a past so vast and so consequential that even its stones resist being forgotten. Rome is not merely a city. Rome is an idea that never died. When the Romans wrote their laws, the world learned that law governs men, not men the law. When the Republic rose, the world saw that it was possible to live without a king. When Rome became Christian, it sent a faith into the world that today counts more than 2 billion souls among its followers. When the Renaissance relit Rome's flame, European art was changed permanently and completely. Latin died, or seemed to, but French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian are its children, still speaking in its voice. Roman law is the foundation of continental Europe's legal systems. Roman architecture, the arch, the dome, the column, appears on every continent, from Washington, D.C. to New Delhi. The Ides of March, crossing the Rubicon, bred in circuses. These phrases live in languages Rome never knew, spoken by people who have never thought about where they came from. Edward Gibbon, the great 18th century English historian, sat among the ruins on the Capitoline Hill one evening and felt history pressing in on him from all sides. He spent years afterward writing The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, one of the greatest works of historical writing ever produced. But what Gibbon actually wrote was not a story of collapse. It was a story of survival, of something that falls and rises and falls and rises, always in a different form, never quite dying. Today, more than 2.5 million people live in Rome. Every year, tens of millions of visitors from every corner of the world come to lay their hands on walls 2,000 years old. They come to throw coins into the Trevi Fountain. Not because of superstition, really, but because of a feeling they cannot name. A feeling that something is here, something larger than the present moment, something that pulls at a thread deep inside them and refuses to let go. Rome was defined by philosophers, built by emperors, kept alive by popes, adorned by artists, and guarded by history itself. This city died and lived again. It burned and was rebuilt. It fell and rose. And each time it rose, it was stronger than before. Perhaps this is why the Romans themselves said, Rome was not built in a day, and then added with that quiet Roman confidence, and Rome will not fall in a day either. Roma Eterna, eternal Rome. This is not a boast. It is a historical fact. Every structure humanity has built, from legal systems to engineering, from faith to art, carries Rome's fingerprint somewhere in its bones. We are all, in every language, in every corner of the world, a little Roman. And perhaps that is the greatest conquest of all. Not the legions, not the aqueducts, not the marble palaces, but the simple, astonishing truth that a she-wolf nursing 2 abandoned boys beside a muddy river gave birth to an idea that the world has never been able to let go of. Before Rome was an empire, it was a dream that beat in the chests of men like Romulus, Scipio, Caesar, and Augustus. Each of them wanted something, power, glory, honor, peace. But all of them, unknowingly, were partners in building something larger than any one of them could hold. Rome was not the work of a single man. It was the work of generations. Each one came, added something, protected something, and passed. And what remained was more immortal than any name. Today, when a law student in Paris studies Roman law, when an architect in Chicago draws Doric columns, when a writer in Tehran or Tokyo uses the word empire, all of them are paying tribute to Rome without knowing it. Rome is like the air we breathe, always there, even when we cannot see it. This silent inheritance is the most powerful legacy in all of history, because it is not imprisoned in museums or dusty books. It flows through our daily lives, through our streets, through our institutions, through our very idea of what civilization means. Perhaps that is why Rome never truly died. Perhaps what happened in 476 AD was not an ending, but a transformation. Like water becoming vapor, rising and falling again as rain. Rome lived on in the church, was reborn in the Renaissance, continued in modern law, and revealed itself in the architecture of cities that did not yet exist when Rome first fell. Rome died so it could live again. And in that dying and living again lies perhaps the greatest lesson history has ever offered us. What is truly valuable does not disappear. It only changes its shape. And that first dream, begun beside the Tiber River so long ago, is alive still. In every city that has law, in every church whose dome touches the sky, in every heart that has ever dared to want justice.